What's going on, podcast listeners? My name is Michael Chernow. I am a restaurateur and lifestyle entrepreneur, and I am truly obsessed with living a life better than yesterday through wellness, fitness, and good vibes. I've always wondered if the drive to succeed is something we are born with, or if it's something that is made over time through grit, drive, and perseverance. I get to answer that question exactly, and the goal of this podcast is to talk with people that have absolutely crushed it in life and have inspired me to do the same. This is Born or Made. Hi guys, welcome back to the Born or Made podcast. I am pumped today to be talking to a really cool guy that has done an enormous amount in his career. His name is Vinnie Fisher. He is a best-selling author. He's written a number of books, but the books that really stand out are The CEO's Mindset and False Prophets. I cannot wait to learn about those things, specifically false prophets, because I think we definitely are playing in a world where there is a lot of that. He's also founded a company that really helps entrepreneurs understand the financials of their business. It's called Fully Accountable is the name of his company. And he's helped companies grow to 8 figures a number of times. I really am looking forward to dig into what he's done, how he's done it, and hopefully to find out whether he thinks he was born with this ability to crush it in life or if he was made over time. Welcome to the show, Vinnie Fisher. Happy to have you.
Oh, I love that intro, man. Michael, thank you for having me. And I'm excited that we got to share a little bit about like geography and living where I grew up is kind of where you are. And so I'm excited about this show. I'm massively passionate about the development of leadership in our team. So when I saw that this was on my schedule and our media team got us connected with your show, I got pumped.
Awesome, man. Well, what I would love for you to do, if possible, is to really just sort of give us the real intro. I mean, I know I hit a number of notes and sort of high points in your career, but I'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you're at today.
Cool. Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm a husband of 25 years to my best friend, Debbie. Like we do and make up parenting every day. We have 4 children, teenage children to boot. So we have like lots of adults in the house right now, or at least practicing adults. And so that's really my busy part of my life right now. And like it's my side hustle is running, I have a portfolio of 3 companies, 2 8 figures and 1 7-figure company. I run one of them, right? I run Fully Accountable. I'm the chairman of the board of the 2 others. When you combine all of our work teams across our 3 companies, I have about 150 people in the system. So I'm a busy guy leading people. My training by profession is I was professionally trained as a lawyer. So I'm a corporate and M&A lawyer with a tax type specialty. That's all like underneath the skin of like who I am. But my day to day now, this season of my life, is I'm leading the leaders of our teams.
That is awesome. Leadership, I believe, is definitely the most important piece of any business. I've watched great businesses do great things and then potentially pass off leadership, or leadership have some sort of have a little bit too much confidence in their decision making and not really allowing the team to feel empowered, and shit just get completely turned upside down. I've experienced.
Hey, I broke a great company of ours that was big over the blind spot of some of my leadership. That broken business was 100% my fault. I was the CEO of a 8-figure shared web hosting company with hundreds of people on staff. I was the golden child, winning all kinds of awards. I stepped away as the CEO of that company because we actively as a board made a decision, and it revealed how many levers I was really pulling versus actually building people beyond my shadow. And I broke a mid-stage 8-figure company and ended up selling it for parts when I got it back.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that I just want to point out right there to everybody listening. I believe that the strongest sign of a leader is taking responsibility and accountability at all costs. And that characteristic, that character trait is so important, in my opinion, for people that are working within an organization to know that the leader and the captain of the ship, no matter what happens, no matter whose fault it was, is ready, willing, and able to take responsibility for all mistakes, and also able to celebrate the wins, because I think far too many times people win and don't actually celebrate those wins. And I feel like the celebrations are really, really important, as much as taking responsibility and accountability for the losses. So the podcast of Born or Made, the idea of this podcast is really, I get a chance to sit down with people like you that have inspired me and many, many others. I mean, you've taken two companies to one of the fastest growing companies in America, which is pretty amazing. And I get to sit down with people like you who have done really incredible things and sort of dissect the nature nurture question. Whether, there is really something inherent that comes with true leaders, or if they were made over time. I have my opinions here, but I would love to, through hearing your story and asking you a series of questions that and I also want to be totally transparent. The fact that you are really focused on financials, you said you're a lawyer by training, but focus on the taxes, which means to me a financial focus, is very interesting, because I, as an entrepreneur, am really a creative entrepreneur. If I never had to look at another P&L for the rest of my life, I wouldn't be upset. Really, I wouldn't. P&Ls are very, very important, and without them, you're sort of floating out to sea on a dinghy. But it's not where my skill set really resides. And so I'm so
can I let you in on a secret?
Yeah.
All right, I just want to tell you a secret. It's a secret.
Let's go. Secret times. I won't tell anybody, I promise.
Right. Well, it's the story. We built Fully Accountable because of my problem. When I woke up realizing that I'm quite good at marketing and sales, and I can write copy, and I'm a good marketer. And there's these awards, if you're watching our video, that I get for doing good, masterful marketing things, right offers. The companies that I've broken, I had no relationship to the bottom line. And both of the books that I've written are really under the hood looks at the things I've broken, not the things I was successful at. And to be honest with you, we built Fully Accountable to solve a problem. We just ended up giving that out to the world because it was so effective. I am not qualified to hold any position in this company other than the one I would hold as the founder and CEO. I love to run teams, but I'm quite awful when it comes to all of the financial parts. Now we've built systems and structure, and I've learned over time things like napkin math and decent amounts of things about what I need to know of the businesses I run. And that has allowed me to really improve my leadership. But I don't ever want you to think you're talking to a fractional CFO or controller. If anything, I have such great respect for the many dozens of people on our team that do that for other people.
So we have a lot more in common than I thought. I love that. Yeah. It's certainly been something. And as you know, when you're launching businesses and you're running businesses, you need to have knowledge of every arena. That said, I think some of the greatest entrepreneurs and the greatest leaders really know what they're good at. And then they're able to, based on really their emotional intelligence, to attract people to want to work with them.
Funny you say that. Like, Michael, I wrote, and I have a gift page. And actually, I think I was wrong. I told you something. My team made a gift page for your community. It's fullyaccountable.com/born or made. Of course, they made it already that for us, and that can show up in the show notes. But listen, I wrote in that free giveaway are our books. The book that I wanted to highlight is CEO's Mindset. I named the book after the first chapter, which I think is the critical component to growing a business. See, I never signed up for my premise of all 6 areas of a company. That side hustle creative grind that gets someone from 6 figures to 7 figures, we have to quiet that voice down when you want to go from 7 figures to late 7 figures, 8 figures. People and process become more important than creatives in deepening a company. And so the mindset that has to develop the maturity and leadership is so critical. And so I triple dog dare everyone in the community to read at least the first chapter, and you'll get it about I am completely vulnerable about the component to really leading an entire crew starts with your perspective to build something beyond your creative talents.
Well, I'd like to unpack that, and I hope that everybody listening here is gonna take you up on the opportunity for the books, because that's incredible, and thank you so much for that. But I'd love to unpack that CEO mindset. I wanna understand sort of what your analysis of what that means is.
Yeah. So, first and foremost, the premise of the CEO's mindset early on, and I can speak for myself, and I think other owners or entrepreneurs can resonate with the start to something. You either set out that you saw a product idea or a service that you were solving, in my case, something for me or for the community at large. And then from there, as people start buying it, you start having this momentum like, I can't do this all by myself. I need some help. I need others to help me do it. Well, immediately at that point, you have to be honest with yourself that if it's not you doing it, it's going to be less than the vision of what you believe you can do it at. So if I have someone in my marketing department writing content or sales copy or getting on a phone to close a sale or distributing out product like our health supplement company, well, that's going to be less than me. And I started to realize the holy cow, the vision or desire for my level of performance versus someone else's, there's always going to be a gap. And so I had to get comfortable with me. I made up my own little term, the 70% rule. Is it 70% of what I'm going to do? And can I live with that gap? Well, it started me on this journey of like, when something starts to go, you don't need much in the early days. You need maybe a person or two. And then eventually this triangle kicks in where you need a manager, you need some experts, you need a technician, you need people who are going to lead strategy. Well, it requires people to be in each of those places. But the part that could never get fixed for me as I would be on that hamster wheel was the heartbeat part. I would give people pieces of it and they were always missing DNA, because what I didn't understand early on was the heartbeat of the company was me, and I had so much influence over it. So once I flipped the script and I wasn't so much worried about expertise in those areas, but I was trying to do a cultural fit to the values that matter to me, I started building massive people on our team that made the most valuable thing we have people. And then whatever it is we do, we ROI or margin on became secondary.
Dude, you are so speaking the language of my life as a leader. Culture, as far as I'm concerned, business without culture is dead. I've said it a bunch of times. It's a quote that I developed because at my core, I believe business without culture is dead. And when I say business without culture, I mean good culture. Because there's lots of businesses with bad culture, right? And those are dead no matter what. I mean, they might survive out of fear. But when you think about fear, typically fear is a place where people are trembling, they're nervous, they make really bad decisions. Most of the time, if it's real fear, they're actually running. And you're not getting anything done efficiently when you're running outside of running, right? And so I believe culture is such a core element to, specifically in my industry, which is, for the last 25 years, the restaurant business. Somebody walks into your restaurant, they feel culture immediately. And if there's no
I put
culture,
myself through college and law school in the hospitality industry. And I really love that because I got to know people at a very deep level. I was more front of the house, not the chef style, but was a manager, restaurants, bartender. For me over time, what you're saying is so true. People follow you. That's true. In the absence of leadership, people will follow anyone. And so they follow you in one of two categories. They follow you because they have to or they want to. And so we just are always paying a temperature to, are people following and building DNA in our company because they want to or because they have to? And
gosh,
that's
that's
the early indicator as to fear versus really.
I love that. I love that. I love that. So I've got a two-part question. Let's talk about culture and how if somebody's listening here and they're either an entrepreneur or they're some sort of a department head and they're trying to implement great culture. We're in a tough time right now globally,
Yep.
right? In so many different ways. What kind of tips and tricks can you offer the listener to start really honing in on developing a great culture?
So if you so want, people can go to my website or one of ours. I'll just give you the one of the primary company I operate, Fully Accountable, at fullyaccountable.com. You could go to the About Us section and look up our values, and you'll see caring, competent, and committed. But hey, it's so awesome. I'm just going to make a quick comment. You're drinking that water bottle. My son, Vinny, is just like you, drinks out of this gigantic jug. The kid drinks a good amount of water. So I just want to say that. Hey, thanks for that. But so if you go there and you see those values, and you're going to read about this in CEO's Mindset right away. We have this entrepreneurial thing when we're like looking at values as like a company thing. Values actually is an extraction about that born/made thing you're talking about, my personality and who I am. So if you go and want to know some depth to Vinnie Fisher, just go to our website and look at the sub pieces of caring, competent, and committed. And you're going to see things like, we're going to tell you the truth regardless of the result. And the reason why is I was raised in an environment where lying was a way to make yourself look better. And so one of my core struggles in life was that was taught to me as appropriate. So we aren't going to do that. I was also raised in an environment where it was always someone else's fault, a lot of finger pointing. So we don't do finger pointing here. I was raised corporately in an environment where you had to be at your office from a certain amount of time to a certain amount of time. So for me, performance over showing up is way different. When you say you're going to do something, do it. And if you can't, explain why you can't. All those things that are in there, all that stuff is literally me. Now, here's what I learned about that. The more I know me, the more I can be surrounded with people who have attributes and values like that. And then when you add to that some technical things that they're better at that I'm not going to be good at, you start rounding out your team. But who do you give the most benefit of the doubt to every day? Every day you don't work out, or you don't talk to your wife the right way, or you don't do something with the kids. You're like, all right, come on, buckaroo. You can do that better the next day. Well, if those people around you have attributes and values and character and the utmost integrity that looks like yours, then you're going to tend to be around people that DNA wise will act and respond like you when dealing with situations with your customers and your family and your clients and all the things around you. And so your value set as a person is so critical to coming up with company values. Now I get it. Someday our company's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people running around. Maybe the culture itself, hopefully the DNA that we would have imparted makes it into there. But maybe a season of life, that DNA changes. But for the vast majority of small and medium-sized businesses, you and I are its heartbeat. And if we don't get a good check on that, you can start to see why you have problems with a heart attack of people who are on your team.
You said 70% rule. And what that said to the way I processed that, because I've experienced the exact same thing, right? I've experienced this, as somebody who's a starter. Really, I'm a starter. As a starter, there's so much passion and and just excitement and sort of just vigor when creating something. And then if you're able to actually take that vision and bring it to life, and you start seeing people excited to use it, and then not only are they excited to use it, but they're telling their friends about it. And then before you know it, you've got this really wonderful thing. The first thought that comes to most people's minds when that happens is, how do we grow this? Like, how do we make this bigger? And you mentioned so eloquently that every single time you bring someone in to sort of take a rein or take a rope and run with it, it's diluting the visionary, right? It just is. There's no way around it. That's why everybody says, the hardest thing to scale is culture. So because I've experienced this 3 times, and like, and I love what you said about the 70%, because I guess what you're saying is, if you've got to be comfortable with like 70% of what you bring to the table long term. And if it drops below 70%, then what?
They're out. So I believe in quick to hire, slow to hire. They both work for me. And depending on the marketplace, you might have to pull one trigger or the other. But I never believe in anything different than quick to fire. If I'm wrong and I make the wrong hire, and that person, they rarely are sitting in the wrong seat. They're just sitting in the wrong bus. And if I move them to another seat, I tend to have the same problem. That 70% gap is a gap between the idealism of what I want for our product or service and what wisdom I might bring to the table vis-a-vis someone on my team. If I suffocate them and don't give them room to do it with a little bit of variance, we're never going to have anything grow beyond my shadow. And so the problem, when I measure that against, I'll pick me to start anything. I'll put me up against any other starter I know. I'm quick. I'm very quick on the take of customer mindset, what they like. I can write good copy. I can have stuff done really fast. But once I get to a certain point, I'm the last person I would pick to stick through consistency. And so what I have to do is surround myself with consistency. Each of my 3 COOs, well, at least 2 of them, I'll be honest, are extremely good at consistency. And so I continually help them with the emotional equivalent of people, and they keep improving our process. And those 2 pieces allow us to peak perform. But a problem with someone who has a process mindset, they usually don't do people real well in the beginning. And so if I don't give them room and grace and mercy and kindness and helping them through, not everything is a nail and they can be a hammer, well, then I'm going to churn through good people if I don't have that gap of that 30%.
What do you think your strongest skill set is as a leader?
I for sure, I've been in trouble for this my entire career. I can see a problem so much faster than anyone else with a quick solution and a real solution. I got in trouble in my law practice when someone would struggle for years over something, come in a 15-minute meeting, I figured it out. I have a ridiculous ability for that. I'm so thankful for it. I also have an emotional equivalent. Like, I can diagnose personality makeup very quickly. I've probably interviewed over 10,000 people. I've had over 2,000 people on my team. I use my words quite well. I can speak and be very open. And so those 2 things make me an effective leader of people.
So we're living in a world where brick and mortar retail across all categories are probably in the worst place in history, I would say, maybe outside of the Great Depression. But brick and mortar retail today, clothing, fitness, restaurant, coffee shop, bar, any nightlife, any live event, any tangible experiential business is really struggling. The world of digital is at all-time highs, right? It's just at all-time highs.
Two of my 3 companies are exploding. I mean, we're like every category you can ask about: record growth. You're exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And so It's obviously very hot right now. Categorically, as an expert in the arena, where do you see some of the strongest plays happening, and where do you think what do you think is a flash in the pan, and what do you think is here to stay?
I want to answer that a little bit by backing up a hair, and I want to let everyone hear this with great humility. If you are a local brick and mortar person, you didn't do anything wrong. If we went back to November of 19 and you were talking with me and you're like, hey, local versus digital, the world could probably have dreamed up faster some kind of cyber attack shut down the internet. And the local person would have thought maybe they don't have as much margin, but they have a consistent business that's there to stay. And we knew eventually, as we got closer to 2030, the digital world and online buying behavior might have eaten more market share, but no one would have envisioned this line in the sand. If the governor of Ohio, which is where I live outside of Cleveland, got on TV or whatever and said the internet has a virus, don't log in, my businesses would have taken a massive beating. Like, I just want to say that, because that doesn't mean we did anything right. It just means we were on the other line of the sand. And the people who weren't, hey, that means life's changed and things have to change. We can look at periods of history where external events have changed the behavioral aspects of a closed and a free market. So I want to say that first. But if I just dial in on digital and what's going on in digitization and consumer behavior, you go back a little bit and you go with this category of e-commerce. We call it direct to consumer, right? We're selling things without a retail store. We have our own shopping cart. Maybe we use Amazon as a marketplace. Maybe we don't. But we can directly sell to a consumer. In the traditional sense, up until now, direct to consumer has been fighting for an existence, and it would do anything it could to get an eyeball of a customer, even if it meant break even or lose money, to build brand. Well, here's what I think is going to die fast. If you keep that mindset going forward, now that we've had an acceleration of buying behavior online, you're in a lot of trouble. Now you need to worry about margin, keeping cash, because if you want to be a brand that sticks around and you keep an old direct to consumer mindset, you're going to get run right over.
That's such a great point. So let's talk about what the new direct to consumer mindset is, because obviously cost of acquisition, per for a customer is not cheap. It's very expensive.
42 cents of every dollar is typically spent to acquire or reacquire your own customer. It's the most expensive category of anybody doing business digitally to acquire a customer. It's not labor, it's not supply chain, it's cost of acquisition. And so my book that you will also get, called False Profits, for free, if you just go and log in to get it under Born or Made, fullyaccountable.com, at the show notes, you'll see that link. I literally did this in my own health supplement company. I didn't realize some of the awful decisions I was making. A company was profiting at 8%. What I didn't know is a company of my type should have been profiting around 20 to 22%. So instead of being happy with my razor thin margins or no money at the end of a month because I was acquiring customers, I suddenly became consumed with where's the 12 or 14 points I'm losing every month. And it clicked in that the biggest problem I had was my acquisition costs. And I quickly had to start dialing in my leaky bucket of all the waste I was spending to acquire the customer. And the first one was trying to be to everybody instead of knowing my audience. Second thing was being across too many channels. Well, that pervasive attitude in direct to consumer is still here. And if people don't dial that in, being across too many channels or too broad of an audience, you're going to run out of money. And then the ones who are figuring that out are going to take your customers.
Who's doing it really well?
The ones who are dialed in and recognize the niche of audience and are speaking to specifically that audience and don't believe in this broad, the riches are in the niches. The secret to fully accountable. Yeah, we got expert CFOs. We got expert controllers. We do the work. It's hard. I get it. Our secret is we only live in e-commerce and digital. So all I have to do is train our people to know one language. They don't have to know real estate. They don't have to know manufacturing. They just have to know digital. That's the secret. So guess what? We speak to e-commerce and digital people. We speak their language. So if I sell a product, I sell a health supplement, And if I'm selling a nerve pain supplement, well, that's a category of probably 55 to 70-year-olds. So if I've got copy written for a 20-year-old, it's never going to resonate with them. Well, if you look at most people marketing activities, it's too broad. They're talking to too many people, and it's diluted and it's noisy and it doesn't stand out. And then capture that on top of that same, what I consider scattered thinking. You're in channels that the people you should be talking to aren't in. That 1-2 punch is sucking out most good companies' ability, who have good products, but they'll never win against somebody who's dialed more into an audience and really managing the channels of where they're spending their money.
So I think what you're saying here, and I just got to say, this is so interesting for me, because I'm stepping into this world and I'm super pumped about it, but it's just so interesting. I also want to just step back a second and appreciate what you just said about the local brick and mortar businesses. As everybody or most people know that are listening to this show, I come from the world of restaurants. I've been working in restaurants and opening restaurants since I'm 12 years old. And I am scratching the surface of 40 years old. I'll be 40 any day. And so, that people typically, when people ask me what I do for a living, I've gotten into the habit of saying I'm a memory maker. That is truly what I believe my skill set is. I really appreciate people, and you've talked a lot about people, so that is everything for me in the world of business. But also creating atmospheres that people are really excited about. And so one thing that I've said over the years is human beings crave experience. They always have it, and in my opinion, they always will. And I'm experiencing this now as much as any operator in the world of brick and mortar business. I'm watching two businesses that I've built with my blood, sweat, tears, and heart and soul. They're going to be all right, but it's a tough time. So I definitely wanted to appreciate what you just said, because it's very important to understand that there's so many people.
I also want to throw out there that like you and I are going to be friends, and at the same time, like we're so similar in a lot of things. Like, my gifting is hospitality. So when you're sitting there speaking about experiences, my core mantra to me is experiences over stuff. I'll burn chunks of the Fisher Empire creating experiences. I don't really want to buy stuff. It's pretty obvious based on how I'm dressed, but like that, it's so that. And so I love, of course, you're going to be good at hospitality because that's your gifting.
Well, the way I look at it is things are fleeting, right? Stories are only told through experience, and human beings are just addicted to stories. When you really break it down, the businesses that have done the best and the human beings that have had the happiest lives love to tell and listen to stories from the beginning of time. And stories are only able to be told through experience. And so, I couldn't agree with you more that the local experience is, and those style of businesses, they're definitely not going anywhere. So it's a tough time, but digital stuff. I think what I'm extrapolating from what you said is, do not spray and pray. Really understand who your customer is. Really, before you go out there and just splatter cash all over everybody else's pockets, really spend the time to understand who your customer is, and then go all in on where they are. Is that what I'm sort of?
100%. We'll make agreements as leaders. We'll say things like, here's a laundry list. We'll say like, oh, I'm not good at marketing. I'm just good at making a product, or I don't really want a lot of people on my team, or, I don't even really know if I have the time. Fill in your blank of the agreement you make. And one of them is this idea that like, in digital marketing, we buy into the automation of stuff as opposed to getting to know the customer and the problem that you solve for him or her. And like, I think that the person who's creating the product or has the message can be so close to the customer and the problem. And we get caught up in this like automation slash digitization, and it's removed and it shows. And instead of using that as a way to build efficiency, we use automation as a way to kind of like skip a few critical parts to growing a business. And all of a sudden, you're just spending money.
My last boss, before I opened my first business 12 years ago, he was a major inspiration to me. I mean, he is a complete maniac, but major inspiration to me. Really, really gave me a platform to stand on, really helped me in so many different ways. But one piece of advice that he gave me early on, early on as I began my own venture, was he said, Mike, one thing that I would suggest is to not make yourself a fixture of your business. And what he meant by that was, or the way I processed that was, if you take the fixture literally, if there's a light fixture on the wall in the restaurant, and that light fixture provides light for a certain amount of space in the restaurant, and then all of a sudden that light fixture was broken and people couldn't see, they wouldn't be happy. What I took from that was, if I made myself every single day a component of the actual business, so I was there every moment of every day, part of the experience for people was to see me, and then all of a sudden we decided to start growing the business, I was no longer there. The experience for those people that were looking forward to having me part of the experience was not going to be as good. And I fought with that advice. I have to be honest, because for me, I love being there. It's who I am, Yeah. And I honestly, it's some days I think that was really grave advice. And other days I say, man, like, how could I not be at the core of the business? Definitely not the guy that's making all the decisions all the time, because I have no interest in that. Zero interest. I want great people with me making great decisions. And I certainly don't want to be the one making all the calls, but like being a part of it in a real way at the forefront of it, I think is very important. And I do also think that there are a lot of businesses out there that don't actually have a person, right? There's no like personality behind the business or in front of the business. But I think there are a number of businesses that I've really paid close attention to in the digital world that are very successful, and there's always a person. There's always someone that is sort of pushing them along. How do you feel about that? It's a lot easier to do something like that in the world of experiential businesses, but in digital businesses where it's a lot harder to tell stories, because either you're seeing something on Amazon.
It's expensive.
It's
expensive.
Like, yeah.
It's expensive to tell a story digitally because you got to get people to pay attention. And so you got to buy that attention. So it's expensive to tell a story.
That said, if there's a person that could actually do what we're doing right this moment, like I am with you right here, right now. We're in different places, but we are communicating digitally. And I think anybody who listens to this podcast, and I'm not patting you on the back and patting me on the back, I'm just saying that anybody who's listening to this podcast right this moment is definitely getting value here. There is absolutely no doubt about it. I do not doubt that for a second. If you're listening to this, you are getting value. How do businesses without a person or personality or some sort of charisma? How are they succeeding?
I want to make three comments because I loved your story about the light bulb and being a fixture. I want to say three things that I'm going to talk about. One is the hero's complex. If I had to do a 2.0 version to the CEO's mindset, as part of the 70% rule, the thing that rubs against it is this hero's complex, because you actually know you've been gifted with like this maverick's ability to go first, a lot of passion. You kind of know you got this internal like Kung Fu Panda ability to kind of do the thing that you know is right for the cadence of the business. That is this desire to be there. Like you want to be there, you want to make the decision, like you love it so much. We start building an identity off the success of the thing. It's a very natural trait that comes along with high intensity leadership, fill in the category, digital or retail, I don't care where you are. It also becomes intoxicating. Well, that runs against growing it beyond your shadow. The other thing I'd say is if it's personality contingent, the only issue I really have is the core issue. One of the things I've learned in my businesses is that true depth and consistency is based on value proposition, not sales proposition. And so a good dynamic person can sell well. Something that's focused on solving a problem for the customer is value proposition based, not sales proposition based. And so I had to learn to switch that a little bit, right? We had sales proposition dialed in. As you can imagine, I could probably sell ice cream to Eskimos. But what we didn't do well was we didn't dial into value proposition. And so I wrote about that in our book, and I'm thankful that we live that journey. We live it now. What I care about, like if one of my team, a fractional CFO or controller, lets down a client on customer service, okay, I would rather that than have a competence hit. I care about the problem of what we solve for them. I never, ever get comfortable with a customer service hit. It's just my makeup. But I would way rather deal with that complaint than they jack up the balance sheet. And so I just use technical terms that they're good at that I know that I'm not, but those are real things. And what I mean by the third thing, which leads with heroes complex value proposition, is this idea of helping to lead the strategy of the business. And so I think what happens is when I was leading, something took momentum or legs, and I was making it up as I went. I had to be okay with some of that. Well, if I'm not looking a little bit ahead as the strategist or visionary or quick start and giving people clear direction, I'm not making their path straight. And so what happened was it worked great under your analogy when I'm there being the light. The second I moved away, they didn't know where they were going. They were in a dark spot. And so if you don't have those three things where someone's fighting against heroes, when you step away, and then finally, like, how do I help lead them so they know where they're going when I'm not there?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
I think it's something that I've certainly struggled with. There's no doubt about it. And as I get older in my career, I have gotten much more comfortable with it. The other component of the sort of, I guess, your the hero complex thing is it's very hard to sell a company when its sort of main draw is a human, right? Like humans don't, I mean, maybe in some businesses humans sell themselves, but in a business, I think most people today have this big dream of creating something great, to really, really building value. Not only in a product or a process or a service or an experience, but in monetary value. And then
literally solve a problem and get paid for it, right? At the
right.
core level, people really want that. And they want, I'm driven by that every day when I get up. When you look at value of a business and you look at something that's built mostly around someone, thankfully, I have something different than the rest of the accountancy space. Most accountancy and finance firms are built by and around an expert. I wasn't one. I built it as an outsider. So I'm actually not trapped in being one of the service components of what I do. When you're an expert and you build what you do, you have to then recognize that as one of the people delivering it, you have to find a way to duplicate and remove you. So chefs in a restaurant, front of the house, maitre d's, accountants of an accounting firm. It's extreme. My law firm, like when I was trying to step away as the chief corporate guy, we always had a duplication problem because they wanted Vinnie in there. And every time he stepped away, we had a dilution problem. And so quite honestly, companies take big hits when it's built around that person because there's a value problem. And that person typically doesn't want to sell and be on someone else's team because then they feel like they're entrapped or they're like a little slavish. Not to get really beat on that word, but it's how you feel. So why would you sell yourself into another job unless it's got a retirement component to it? And so that's always the struggle when it's really a strong personality. It's got a value hit and it's got an extraction of you out of the business hit.
There are two books that I've always looked at as some of the greatest reads to date for me as a young guy in business. And I'm sure that there's going to be two more once I get my hands on False Prophets and the CEO Mindset. But The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber is a book that I read, I don't know, 6 months before I opened my first business. And it really talks about exactly what you're saying. Just because you're a technician doesn't mean that you're going to be a great owner or leader. And so I learned a lot about that. And then another book that I think really focuses on legacy, which is ultimately the true sign of a leader, right? Like it's not about what the company does when you're in the seat. It's about what the company does when you're out of the seat. Yeah. And that book, From Good to Great, really talks a lot about that process of legacy.
I love everything Jim Collins writes. I just love it.
Good. He's great.
He's pretty solid. Yep.
So like that piece there, being able to develop legacy as a leader and not having confidence that when you step away, that the company could even grow exponentially. Because they want to really, grow in your name and really shine and really do it for the person who led them to water. Really drink the water. How do you do that?
So one of the things that I'm 10 years older than you. I just had my big 50 this year, so I'm 50 years old. But it's funny, what I've been living parts of this last season of business and life. And by the way, just for everyone's clarity, I think of a season as a 5-year run. And then I break those into two pieces. There's like a 2.5, 3-year first half, 2.5, 3-year second half. Hey, Vinny, that's 6 years. Well, there's overlap, but it's like a 2.5, 3-year each half of the season. And one of the interesting things that has actually shown up is there's this difference between being successful or success and significance. I read a great book that put some wonderful language around this. It's called Halftime by Bob Buford. But the whole idea, and that it's a great read, and we spend the first piece of our career during seasons of acquisition wanting to be successful. We have validation externally that we've got what it takes to do whatever it is we're going to do. And we switch, and obviously by its name, you get it. You're hit at 40, right? Your life expectancy, you're in the second half. You start experiencing, hey, there you are, buddy. It's how it goes. And you're starting to experiencing things that you realize, wait a minute, I really desire and crave significance more than success. And so things like legacy, generational impact, something that's going to live beyond you, start becoming more important. So for me, 80+% of my time is spent with my 3 COOs that run our companies. I don't give a lot of my time to other people. Now I do brand ambassador stuff like I'm doing right now, spread out a good message, kind of speak on behalf of our whole team, really like amplifying, helping others, love giving room and margin for that. But if it's that, my family and leading our COOs, what's dead last is brand ambassadorship. What's next, always what's first is my family. I will blow something off, rob from the company for them. But what I will also do is rob from busyness to help our COO. And why I will is I want him or her to actually embrace leadership, but they're missing so many things that I've already been through. So critical thinking, legacy. And if they can do it and they get to look down, like when they get their trophy and they say, that little it on, because the winter's coming soon for old boy here. And I've only got a couple seasons left of real active engagement if I'm going to be real. And then in those couple seasons, what am I going to do? I'm going to put a few more bucks in my pocket, or am I going to build some legacy and some significance?
Wow. I love that. You really just nailed it in the realest way possible. This has been such a great conversation, man. I am like truly excited about this conversation. And I guess I got a few more questions before we wrap this thing up. But if there's a piece of advice that has been given to you or that you pass off to others that you've created on your own, for the listener, from a guy like you who is obviously leads with kindness, you could tell it. I mean, I'm looking at you, so I can just tell that that's the case. But, you know, for those that are just listening, I could promise you that Vinnie Fisher is a kind leader. He does not lead with an iron fist or fear. What kind of advice or what piece of advice would you give? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can. We'll probably have to edit a piece of that out.
Yeah.
Our internet friends got in the way there a little bit, but I heard you about kindness. And so what is your question, Mike?
Oh, so piece of advice that you want to leave the listener with?
You know,
Shoot, man, internet is slowing down here. I don't know if it's me or if it's you.
an impactful leader.
Let's go back to the beginning because I just lost you for a second.
Yep, all good. If I truly want to resonate with what I want someone to know, is leadership, everything is top down. And so a house that's not built on a firm foundation, it won't stand. And so the thing I would love everyone to know is you have a flock that's been committed to you, that's staring at you, whether it's a wife and kids, coworkers, they're looking at you. What are you doing to develop internally your own self-awareness so that you can lead from a position of kindness, humility, compassion, peace, where you can really help develop others to find that out about themselves? I really believe that if more leaders embraced self-development as a way to improve leadership, we would have really a generation of strong impact in leadership. And to do that requires things like habit and routine and effort and all the things that go along with me spending chunks of my day working on me so that I can really put myself in the right position to help others.
I'm so happy you said habit. I'm launching a business called Creatures of Habit.
All right.
And so the next question that I'd love for you to answer for us is, if you can give us 3 to 5 habits that you've done consistently, that you don't have to think too much about, that are actually habits in your life, to help make you a better version of you on a daily basis, what are they?
Sleep 8 hours a day, carve out my morning for myself, and spend every day in scripture.
Wow. Okay. Beautiful. Vinnie Fisher, do you believe you were born with an innate ability to get to where you are today, or you were made over time?
Yes, I believe both, actually. I believe that we've all been built with certain parts to us based on the generational history of where we've come from and where we've been placed. And I also think because of where we've been placed in our environment, we've been nurtured through things that have added parts to our personality that build the framework that we build upon that becomes the stuff we are. Now, I was made new. For me, my faith is critical and important. If you would have seen a few seasons ago, Vinnie in leadership, you'd have seen a guy that was very abrupt, lacked a lot of compassion, would have probably thrown out kindness for performance. And I was made new and washed through some of those wounds that I would have had in my life. So I consider both. I have the setting where I came from a broken environment. So my ability to scramble and hustle is kind of that core making of me. But when I was able to actually deal with the broken parts of me, claim them, understand them, hand them over, I've also been made along the way. I'm acting now as the best version of a leader I've ever been acting as.
Dude, I wish I would have asked you that question a little sooner, because I so badly want to understand what you did to go from the abrupt, curt, not kind Vinny that I'm staring at right now to where you are today.
I'll give you the short answer, and then on the episode 2, we'll do that.
Episode
The short
2.
answer is I dealt with the wounds of my heart that were holding me back from understanding more about myself and how I was really meant to help others.
My brother, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a very kind man to spend the time with me today. This was such a great chat, truly inspiring. I mean, I am fulfilled today without a question of a doubt, and I cannot wait to share this with the audience that tunes into the Born or Made podcast. All I could say is thank you, and I really look forward to a future friendship and mentorship, and I'm grateful. Thank you so much.
Hey, I'm
man.
excited about you launching in your digital thing. And since people in your world are watching you and doing that hustle, I'll leave you with one other thing. You're going to have something you probably have in you that good, successful people have, that I know I have. I've always been okay with, well, mostly that there are smarter people always in my environment, but I've actually got something that most people don't have. I just don't give up. And so what I would encourage people is, like, those days that suck and you're lonely and you're isolated, just don't give up.
How can we find you? How can people listening find you?
Fullyaccountable.com is a great way to reach out to us. I'm also very available on our social footprint. We live mostly in Facebook and LinkedIn from a social standpoint, haven't really gravitated towards our Twitter stuff. But we also have We Care at fullyaccountable.com. You know, we run a fractional service, outsourced service for e-commerce and digital companies. That's the world we live in. But we really do want others to take advantage of the stuff we have. So reach out to us. If it's not us, we'll get you connected in the right spot. And if you just want to know more about the things we're doing, keep an eye on it. Sign up for the stuff we have. We try to give it all away so that we can meet our mission of helping 10,000 companies double their profit margin.
Dude, you're the man. Thank you so much. Vinnie Fisher, it was a pleasure.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. See you soon.
See you, man.